Who are the Aratar, and what is the significance of this group? With Tolkien already dividing the Ainur, who descended into Arda, into two categories, the Valar and the Maiar, few seem to discuss another subcategory of the Valar, a group mentioned only once by name in the Silmarillion, with no reference made to them in The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, Unfinished Tales, or Tolkien's letters. In this video, I want to explain the purpose of this group, why each member is considered a chief power amongst other powers, and why such a distinction is made when it comes to their role and place in Arda itself. I have another video called Why Do the Ainur Differ in Power, which was the inspiration behind this one, and I recommend that as a companion piece to this video. There was Eru, the One, who in Arda is called Iluvatar, and he made first the Ainur, the Holy Ones, that were the offspring of his thought. These opening words of the Silmarillion will be familiar to most of you. The One, Eru, creating the spirits known as the Ainur, meaning the Holy Ones, before Arda itself was made. Primordial spirits who took part in the music of the Ainur that led to the creation of Arda, each given a part of the mind of Eru, kindled with the flame imperishable, granting them free will. But just as all other races in Tolkien's Legendarium have greater and lesser figures, the Ainur are no exception. It's unreasonable to assume they should be equal, as differences among them lead to change, harmony, discord, and creativity. Their number is unknown, but we do know that many descended into Arda following its creation, those who felt the desire and urge to be a part of the world they envisioned, and Tolkien tells us in various places that Melkor was once the mightiest of the Ainur. That's the entirety of that order, and not just those who descended into Arda. In letter 200 to Major Arboen, dated 1957, Tolkien speaks of the disparities between members of the Ainur. The greatest of them were equivalent to gods of traditional mythologies, remaining inside the world until the story was finished. These were known as the Valar, the Powers, once being the 15 greatest spirits who descended into the world, becoming 14 when the rebel Melkor, later known as Morgoth, was counted no longer among them. Their inherent greatness being so recognisable and understood that they stood above the others of their original order. Knowledge of the story as it was when composed, before realisation, gave each their measure of foreknowledge, and that amount varied greatly, from the fairly complete knowledge possessed by the Elder King, Manwë, to the knowledge of lesser spirits who may have only been interested in some subsidiary matter concerning the world, such as trees or birds. Most of these lesser spirits are the Maiar, who exist as a part of the Ainur alongside the Valar, but are of lesser stature, helpers and servants of the greater spirits. Tolkien in the same letter uses the Maya Sauron as an example, saying that he had been attached to the greatest, Melkor, the being who became the rebel and self-worshipper of mythologies that began with a transcendent, unique creator. Gandalf, another Maya, known as Olorin in the West, was attached to Manwë, and various others during his time in Valinor. Tolkien explaining a hierarchy related to stature, authority, might, majesty, power, and inherent wisdom. Explaining what power is in relation to the Ainur can be quite difficult, especially when many readers or those just interested in Tolkien's Legendarium equate power with demonstrations of power, real effects in the world, mostly destructive power or physical change. This really falls apart when we think of several of the less discussed members of the Valar, such as Vanna the Ever-Young or Nessa the Dancer. Without getting into talk of power rankings, by definition as members of the Valar, these two figures are among the 14 or 15 most powerful beings in the physical universe, one tending to flowers and gardens in Valinor, and the other dancing in Valimar or outrunning animals. I'm sure most would be able to discuss the power of lesser figures such as Gandalf, Saruman and Sauron with more detail than these figures, power in Tolkien's works being far more complex than displays of might. This is what makes the highest of the powers, the Aratar or Mahani, so interesting and perhaps confusing for some. Not only are the Valar the greatest of all the spirits who descended into the world, but 8 of them are the greatest among them. Once again, Melkor excluded from this order. Just how great can great be? What makes Orome stand out when compared to Tulkas, or Nienna to Este? Time for a brief textual history. Despite only having one reference in the edited Silmarillion published after Tolkien's death, he did develop this group a little in earlier texts. Tolkien makes a reference in The Music of the Ainur and the Coming of the Valar, in the History of Middle-earth Volume 10, Morgoth's Ring, to Melkor and the 7 Great Ones of the Kingdom of Arda, talking of the greatest spirits as the Great Ones. This is an interesting passage as it also is where Tolkien describes forms taken by the Valar, including Yavanna being seen in the likeness of a great tree, the beauty and majesty of that form being impossible to describe with words. In texts from 1930, the name Arda wasn't used, but was instead called Anar, which at this time meant sun, meaning the kingdom of the sun. This was a time when the sun existed far earlier in the cosmology of Arda. This word was later changed to Anor in the published text. The greatest among the Valar at this time were known as the 7 Great Ones of the Kingdom of Anar. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue like Aratar. Tolkien then changes this further by calling the greatest spirits the 7 Great Ones of the realm of Arda. He also names them, and these 7 are Manwë, Melkor, Varda, Ulmo, Yavanna, Aule, and Nienna. Tolkien carried this forward into later text, with Christopher Tolkien pointing out that neither Orome nor Namo, Mandos, were counted among the greatest of the Valar. These 7 Great Ones now being called the Aratar, the High Ones of Arda, once 8 and now 7 following the removal of Melkor. We reach the text you can read in your copy of the Silmarillion, with the Aratar now being 8 figures, once 9, following the removal of Melkor, Orome and Namo now being among them. A surprising change considering the symbolic number 7 was used in so many places in the Legendarium, something I will discuss in another video. But as I will discuss in this video, I think each of the 8 figures deserve their title of Exalted. With any excuse to talk about Greek mythology, I think it's quite apt to mention it here. While I am not attempting to equate the Valar with the deities of the Greek pantheon, the comparison makes sense when trying to explain greatness among the already great. Residing on Mount Olympus are the Olympians, 12 major gods, with many other minor gods and heroes. Hades is not considered to be an Olympian due to residing in the underworld, but is still one of the major gods of the pantheon. And there is Persephone, who became the queen of the underworld following her abduction by Hades, another non-Olympian. Now all of these figures are gods, but which gods are the greatest? I'm sure most would answer Zeus as their number one choice, the king of the gods. With him we have to place Hades and Poseidon, the 3 brothers. The Greeks revering those figures surrounding the realm of humanity, Earth. Poseidon explains this in Homer's epic, the Iliad, saying that heaven and earth were divided into 3 parts, and each of us was to have an equal share. When we cast lots, it fell to me to have my dwelling in the sea forevermore. Hades took the darkness of the realms under the earth, while air and sky and clouds were the portion that fell to Zeus, but earth and great Olympus are the common property of all. Understanding their role in relation to humanity is what is important here, with the earth itself being a realm for humanity. The seas surrounding it fell to Poseidon, the realm under the earth to Hades, and the sky to Zeus, all 3 being important in matters of life and death, prosperity and hardship, greater understanding and fear of the unknown. I can't confirm or prove what I'm saying here through any text provided by Tolkien, but my own thoughts about the role of the Aratar and those figures among them are somewhat similar to what I described with the greatest of the Greek gods. The 8 figures are important in relation to the children of Iluvatar and the world they dwell in, each being related to a concept or some element of the world, not only the greatest of the Valar, but the most important, the most revered. I want to now share my brief thoughts on each of these figures, and I will hopefully explain why the Aratar exist in the text. We can view Manwë in a similar way to Zeus, at least in terms of being a king, and not in terms of his deeds. That's an understatement. He is the authority over the powers and all within the world, the greatest authority in the physical world, the Elder King, ruler of airs and wind. He is the Lord of the breath of Arda, commander of birds, the vice-regent of Eru himself. His inclusion here is obvious, a symbol of justice, authority, purity, and the path of Eru. Ulmo is loved by both elves and men, and never abandoned them, not even when they lay under the wrath of the Valar. Elves even believing that he was so deeply instructed in the music of the Ainur that water itself contained an echo of the music. Not only is he important as a link between the world of immortals and mortals, he is the king of the sea and lord of waters. We can compare him to Poseidon, an elemental force and authority over one of the purest aspects of creation, water, untainted by the corrupter Melkor. Again, his place in this order should be easy to understand. To complete the Greek triumvirate, we have Mandos, or Namo. Much like Hades, he shares a name with his dwelling and is also misunderstood, being a keeper of the houses of the dead, summoner of the spirits of the slain, and carrying a title like Doomsman of the Valar is easy for people to misunderstand the role he plays. He is important when it comes to the role of fate in Arda, pronouncing judgments, and being one of very few figures who understands the will of Eru on Earth. Death is a natural part of the world, and this makes Mandos a symbolic figure, a personification of an aspect of the world unchanging, the face of what comes after and one of the last figures many will see before they exit the world itself. Aule is an important figure in relation to the earth and those inhabiting it. Not only is he responsible for the shaping of lands and mountains and the jewels beneath the earth, but he represents the desire to make and create, to innovate and invent, standing as a figure who shows delight and pride in the deed of making, and in the thing made, and neither in possession nor in his own mastery. He is a figure of great mental strength, showing that even the greatest can be tempted and can fall. This aspect of his nature is found within the races of elves, men, and dwarves. He stands as a figure of honour, showing the path that can be taken that leads away from the fall. Varda is another that is easy to explain, the Lady of the Heights, the Queen of the Valar and Stars. She is most revered by the elves, and stands as an opponent of darkness, a shining beacon of beauty and light, wielder of a power to shape the cosmos through the creation of the stars, radiating with the light of Eru, as close to his light as found on earth. She has authority over that which Melkor once craved and could not control, and was able to understand his nature and reject him before others understood it. She, like most of the Aratar, is an elemental force, and creator of that which the inhabitants of the world look upon in their daily lives, a figure prayed to in Middle-earth, a bane for those dwelling in darkness, and a hope for those battling the forces of evil. Yavanna is concerned with things that grow in the earth, from trees like towers and forests to the moss upon stones, or the small and secret things in the mould. Another force of nature responsible for things that grow on and in the earth. As the children rely on the earth for their growth, survival and development, Yavanna is an obvious inclusion here. She is responsible for the Ents protecting the forests of Middle-earth, and for the two trees of Valinor, later destroyed by Ungoliant and Melkor, once a source of light in the world, and one of the greatest acts of selfless creation in the history of Arda. Nienna represents something more abstract, the emotions that shape the development of those dwelling within Arda, her grief becoming a part of the world itself during the music of the Ainur, becoming a part of the world that would outlast forests, mountains and seas. She represents pity, courage, grief and sorrow, even going as far as to speak on behalf of the rebel Morgoth after his sojourn in Mandos, showing mercy and pity when other great powers showed wrath, an example of not meeting hatred with hatred, or evil with evil, being able to place yourself above that which tries to destroy you. Despite being one of the Valar who has discussed the least from my experience, She represents some of the most important aspects and themes of the Legendarium itself. Those emotions she personifies, playing an important role in each of Tolkien's stories, showing that good can come from evil, and that vengeance is not the same thing as justice, pity being a greater weapon than any blade. Orome is the last and probably the most controversial from the discussions I've had in the past. It seems people view Tulkas with a greater admiration, favouring brute strength over what Orome represents. Orome is not a creator of stars, seas, forests or winds. He is the hunter, a relentless pursuer of monsters and fell creatures, riding against the evil of Melkor and eliminating his dark shadow with the sound of golden hooves and a great horn, a friend against the unknown dwelling in the deep and dark places. He is not only concerned for those dwelling in Middle-earth, a protector of them, but one who led the children out of Middle-earth, the face of the great Valar witnessed by the children who awoke in a strange land. A figure who can meet the wrath of Melkor with his own, and leave a Dark Lord fearful beneath the earth. A master of beasts, Orome is one of the few figures, like Ulmo, who directly shows his care for not only Middle-earth, but those within it. While I don't want to diminish the role of the rest of the Valar, the direct threat posed by Tulkas to the Dark Lord Morgoth, the Master of Dreams Irmo, influencing destiny and desire, or Este, the Healer of Weariness. I think the distinction made by Tolkien makes sense when you look at the role the Aratar play in not only the shaping of the world, but the relationship with those who inherit that world and dwell within it. Their deeds and imagination can be witnessed and felt in all directions, and within. And that is why, even among those who are considered the greatest of all beings, there are still those who stand above them, the High Ones of Arda. Thanks for watching. As I said in the video, the Aratar are only mentioned once by name in the main texts, and Tolkien doesn't go into any detail anywhere about why these figures are considered the greatest. So my thoughts in this video are really my own, and I don't want to say that they are right or the only way you can look at these figures. I'm sure many of you will view some of these figures in a different way, or wonder why others among the Valar were not counted among them. I'm happy to hear what you think, but I hope I made clear why such a distinction exists in the first place. If you enjoyed this content and want to support the Red Book, you can subscribe to the channel, join as a member on YouTube for bonus content, or even become a supporter on Patreon. Supporters will be able to access my extended thoughts on this topic and my members only video, Who Are the Aratar, the appendices. I appreciate all the support I receive and want to give a shout out to members of the Valar tier on Patreon: Aelin, Dovid, Joel, Oliver, Wavesailor and Victus. Thank you everyone, and I hope you will return for the next chapter of the Red Book.